So how you been, man? Where you living these days?
I live in St. George, Georgia currently.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty.
That's far away from Ohio, that's for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is.
How do you like it down there?
Oh, dude, it's a mixed bag. It's absolutely perfect for what I need it for. I just needed some space to kind of get away from everything and just recalibrate on all levels. So it's perfect for that. It's like right by like Okefenokee Swamp, like out in the middle of nowhere. The Florida state line's like in my backyard, literally.
No
So,
way.
yeah, dude, it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome, man. I totally get that feeling of like needing to get away. And like
Yeah,
I that's something like I've fantasized about doing it. I have a little bit more like I have stuff that's really keeping me here, like obviously getting married and having a kid, kind of like
yeah.
going.
Congrats, by the way.
Oh, thank you. One of the best things that happened to me in the last few years was that helped me that definitely helped stabilize me a lot. I'll say that
Yeah,
because like before that I was like single bachelor guy, just getting wild and doing
yeah,
crazy stuff, and now it's like I don't know.
yeah.
I gladly trade in the excitement of the single bachelor life for the stability of having a wife and kid.
Y-
So.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that.
I
Um,
think so too. I think it was good for me. It was really good for me. Like
that's
sometimes I
awesome.
think in a way like I don't know, sometimes having those limitations are good for us, right? It's like sometimes having too many options is like I don't know, it's hard to clarify like the direction you want your life to go when you just have so many options. For me it was like
Yeah,
having a getting married and especially having a kid helped me like really clarify my purpose. I'm like, okay, what type of person do I want to be, right? Because now I really have to like focus on, okay, am I being a good
yeah,
role model, right? Before it's like I could be a shitbag all I want. It didn't really matter because I
yeah.
wasn't responsible for anybody. Now it's like doing that hard work of okay, what type of person do I really want to be? Because I want my kid to mirror you know the best
Exactly.
aspects of
Yeah,
what I have to offer. So it
absolutely.
so that's been wild. So okay, so you're in South Georgia.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you move down there?
Almost a year ago.
Really?
Well, yeah, I moved to actually like Jacksonville this past well, not this past November, but the one before it. So yeah, just like a year and a month. So yeah, and then I moved up to where I'm at currently in like February of last year. So yeah, so I've been here for like about a year.
That's cool. Now, how
Yeah,
long?
yeah.
How long are you? Do you have a plan as far as your like you staying down there? You plan to come back up? Do you like it down there? What do you? Or are you just kind of playing it by ear?
You know what's funny? I'm playing it by ear. I'm kind of doing something completely different, total game changer from everything that I've done thus far, and I'm just kind of like getting in touch with the totality of who I am, light, dark, the whole complex, everything, and just being led by spirit, if you will, and just trying to get like real, not trying, I'm just actually am getting real quiet within myself and just being like, where do I need to go? And not having as set of, you can have like a rough outline. I do have my blueprint, but other than that, it can change on a dime. And so it's kind of like when you have the rough idea but hold it lightly. Um,
Right. It's like having
yeah.
it's like a guideline.
Yes,
It's like
exactly. Yeah.
it's not like a rule. It's more like guidelines. What was that?
Yeah.
That's from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
more like guidelines. Like,
Exactly. And that way you don't you don't hold too tightly to your goals. It's like you have them and it's crazy because then you start shifting from like a different point where like, everything falls into place. Even if
yeah.
you have like a bad day or something that like is, crappy or you like perceive obstacles, you more frequently view them as opportunities then
hmm
instead of like, when you have like such a harsh, rigid, like steps to get to a goal, you kind of leave out like the magic, the miracle aspect.
hmm Well, and I
So,
especially think like because of the work you're doing, like in yourself, that's especially true, right? Like out in like the
Yeah.
like in the world of, you know, like where I'm at, right? The world of like business, it pays to have those like rock solid milestones. But when it comes to like your inner work, I definitely agree where it's like, dude, you don't even know like what you're going to uncover. Like when you take that time to like really dive in and be like, what am I made of? Right. Like most people don't do that. They don't go, you know, they don't go, you know, deeper than that surface level. But it's like, I've been getting into some more of that recently where it's like, you know, what am I made of? And it's like, you start to sort of realize how close to an animal that humans really are, right? Because it's like we're driven so much by like so much of our conscious thought is actually driven by instincts, where a lot of time people think of it like a dichotomy, like they're totally separate and they're like, you know, it's like they're at odds with each other, right? Your instincts and like conscious thought. But really it's like, no, there's that interplay where your instincts, you know, probably play, you know, there's like, it's like you have your conscious thought sort of on this surface level, but then you have this like deep, like this like deep sea of millions of years of like instinct built in sort of beneath that. So it's like we live in the world of like, we try to live in the world of conscious thought and we only really think and talk about that. But it's like, there's that like deep primal, you know, sometimes really dark shit that we try to like, no, that doesn't exist. Or like we just sort of like, I don't know. I think we gloss over it too much where it's like, no, most people are like, everybody has like those like crazy instincts. You know, it's like you have those moments of like just total insanity where you want to do something totally fucked up. And then it's like, and then you come back from it. And then like most people don't really like, don't like dive in, but like, what the fuck was that? Right? Like I thought about like, you know, like kicking this baby. Like most people are like, well, everybody thinks about those things. It's like, yeah, but where the fuck did that come from? Right?
Yeah, where did it come from? Dude, and it's so funny that you brought that up because I've over the years, and that's partly one of the pieces why I went away as well, is I've been writing simultaneously like a few different books on a few different topics to be like released in a specific sequence. But one of those, and one of the main things that I want to contribute to the world is basically shadow work, like what you were just talking about, because I think that's a huge problem with humanity right now, is that we have this wretched shadow side, you know, and nobody wants to look at it, and so therefore it's coming out in the most like ridiculous, in your face like sort of ways. And it's like, if we could understand and own up to the fact that like this is common thing, like, you know, if you want to fucking kick a baby for a hot second, it's not that you do it, but it's there, you know, and it needs something that's like needs to be rectified and looked at without judgment, you know. And that,
and it's almost like
how
it's a very very like Nietzsche kind of thing, where it's like what you should be working to do is like recognize that on some level we're all monsters, and then you try to harness that energy versus like, you know, just letting it be sort of rain chaos on your life, right? Like finding that balance of like, okay, look, my conscious thought and where I consciously want to sort of drive my life, but then I have all of these like primal instincts, and what can I do to sort of like align those things? I think that's really interesting. That's really interesting because I've been trying to like, I've been diving into like Beyond Good and Evil again. And I'm like, dude, that shit is like, reading that stuff is so, I'm not that smart. So it's like, I'm going like paragraph by paragraph. I'll like read a paragraph and then I take a day to think about it. Cause that's just one of those books where it's just like, you read a paragraph and you're like,
oh yeah, dude.
You're like, fuck,
any like non-dualist texts. Yeah. It like blows your mind open. Like, like A Course in Miracles is so much like that too. It's like, holy shit. I don't know if you've read any pieces of it, but it's just like a total like non-dualistic text, and it's just like it's so like straight to the point. It's like you'll read like a paragraph and you could just get stuck on that for the rest of the day. Like, you're like, what? Well,
that was like I think it's like the opening paragraph of Beyond Good and Evil was talking about like, why do we search for truth? And then it's like, and then what is the value of truth? Like, why do we value truth over delusion? And I sat with that all day. I'm like, you know, it's like, wow, it's like first paragraph, really like the first 3 sentences, and I'm like, fuck, dude, I've got to take some time with this. It's like, I'm like, I haven't even scratched the surface, and it's like, I think it's one of those things, like it can be it's dangerous work to do that. Like you end up on the other side. Like I don't know if some people could really handle it. Like they maybe don't have the, I don't know. It's almost like how some people really can't, like that if they, like they do an acid trip and like so, and it changes them in a way that like maybe they weren't particularly ready for. And
if you don't have the foundation for that, like it's really hard to integrate back into the world and function normally like how you did before. It's like that Zen concept is like chop wood, carry water. It's like, well, what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood and carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood and carry water. Mm-hmm. It's like, even though sometimes you end up feeling like Sisyphus, like pushing the boulder up from a different context, like it's like you have the framework, coming back from something like that and feeling like how trivial everything is, or having touched, the face of God, so to speak, and then coming back and dealing with this or whatever experience you may have.
Right.
Sometimes they're like one and the same.
Isn't it so funny? Because it's like you have this, I've heard like, like Ram Dass. And like, hearing him talk about like going up into like the, into like the Himalayas and going into this like cave and meditating and just being so holy. And then like just coming back home, and like the first thing his dad says is like, so do you have a job? Like, so just like, you just come back to like just the reality. And then you have that like, and I've been guilty of this too, like looking at everything with like, how do I say it? Like the world being so, I don't know, mundane and imperfect. Like when you're in it, like when it's easy to be holy when you're in a fucking, cave in the Himalayas, but then when you go out into the world and people are petty and cruel, and it's like you lose that sort of that holy a little bit, I suppose. And then sometimes it can be hard to like, I don't know, reconcile the two, like that holiness and how everything's perfect, but then you're like getting pissed off because somebody cut you off in traffic. And it's sort of like somehow reconciling those two things. And it's like, I think part of it, and this is what I'm working with, is like, recognizing that I'm like, I have this aspect of me that is higher functioning and is, at a higher, almost like a sort of a higher plane of existence, it feels like. But then I also am human. So I'm still going to do like dumb human shit because I'm basically like a chimpanzee. I'm like basically a chimpanzee with like a frontal cortex. So like I'm still going to do dumb chimpanzee stuff from time to time.
That's exactly it. And that's like your higher self, though, is that piece of you that is fully integrated. As we're experiencing it right now, it's like we don't perceive it as integrated, but then, the person who cuts you off in traffic is like, that's your shadow side projected outward. It's like everything that we see is everything that was not good enough for us to like own about the deepest aspect of ourselves. Whether we're looking at like, synagogues being shot up and like children being shot, like the wars or famine or, any of that stuff, or even, just somebody being an asshole, like, while ordering like a latte or something like that, or vice versa, like your barista being an asshole, but like, it's all projected garbage, all darkness and within us that we haven't accepted fully.
Right. And sometimes those things like they point out, and I think that's sort of where acknowledging like the untruth or the parts of us that are petty, like those are almost more valuable than the noble aspects of ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially because it points out where where you still need to do work.
Yeah, it's the key to our awareness of wholeness and our like, it's the seeming obstacle to the awareness of love's presence. And and when we start to view things like that, it's like it's kind of odd. Like you get in the realm of just forgiveness and seeing it exactly as it is, and it's like, oh, this is an opportunity. This is like an aspect.
Doesn't it turns everything on its head, right? Like when as soon as you're like, oh, like, because in the beginning you rationalize a lot of your anger and then you sort of project it on them, like they're the problem, they're the problem. But then you start getting into like Stoic philosophy and you're like, oh no, like I can't control the outside world. The only thing that I can control is my reaction to it. So then the work is like, this is on me, right? If I'm going to, if I get angry, it's my fault, right? It's like, that's on me. And then that's kind of like, that's pointing out that work, man. It's like, we got to like, okay, like if I know road rage is my thing, it's not, but I've got a bunch of other things. Like I know that this is an area where I need to work. And then actually, the person who's cutting you off in traffic, they're giving you the opportunity to grow. And then it's like, then you're thankful for when somebody cuts you off, because here's another opportunity for you to exercise that muscle, right? And that's like, okay, like, you know, I have my daughter now, right? And there are times where when I'm in my shit and she does something shitty because she's 2 and that's what they do. Yeah. And I'm like, and I get, and then I get mad. But then there's other times when I'm in my higher self, or, you know, and sometimes it's a little bit after my initial reaction where I'm so thankful for the shitty thing she did, because it's another opportunity for me to exercise patience, which historically has been something that I've struggled with, patience with people who are doing things that annoy me. So in a way, her being just a terrible 2-year-old is encouraging my growth. And there's so much, and that manifests itself in so many ways, right? The guy on the highway who cuts you off, like, he's giving you the gift of the opportunity to become better. My daughter who destroys the living room right after I clean it, the opportunity to exercise patience, right?
Yes.
So many things like that. And then it's like, then you don't go from interaction to interaction as like a victim, or you don't move from, you know, like angry situation to another angry situation. It's like,
no, it's like you have indirect control over any given situation just because of your reaction to it.
Yeah.
It's like when you pause, it's like you don't have direct control over what happens, but like how you said, and how you react to it just can change and lead to the next moment being, you know, free of the past, like truly like miraculous, and kind of like the quantum sense. It's like we're constantly dragging the past into the present. So when people feel like it's Groundhog Day, you know, and it's like they're replaying the same experiences with the same types of people, the same scenarios, and they're just like, dude, how do I get this to stop? And it's like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? You know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But when you free the present from the past, you can create like an unlimited future.
Yeah, and I feel like doing that, that's been part of my work too, is like not holding people to old narratives. You know, if I know somebody, and I've known somebody for a long time, there's a pretty high likelihood that I know a lot of shitty things about that person. And but they may no longer be that person. There's so many people, like I hung around with a really shitty crowd when I was younger, and a lot of those people have grown up to be fucking awesome, beautiful people. And if I held them to an old narrative of who they used to be, and it's like, but we're all evolving from moment to moment, right? Who am I to say that, you know, you're not a different person today than you were yesterday, or from moment to moment, like 5 minutes ago, right? You never know when somebody's like made a sort of a quantum leap in their life. So it's like, it's almost like the best operating system is just to accept somebody who they are in that moment, try to remain in that like open, loving, like sort of appreciative, gratitude-oriented mindset, and like sort of that Ram Dass thing where it's like your work is like turning people into trees, which means accepting them just the way they are, right? And it's like some of that is easier when you can be like not holding them to those old narratives, right? Letting the past be the past, and then giving them like that moment to be maybe a new version of themselves, or even if they're the old version of themselves. That's you know, learning to accept everybody how they are. Yeah. Not necessarily meaning that you spend a bunch of time with them, right? If they're terrible, toxic.
No, it's like you can still have your boundaries.
Absolutely. But again, allowing yourself to be like, oh, okay. Like, you know, like you recognize, like if they're annoying, you recognize your annoyance. And then you're like, huh, that was interesting. You know, it's just like phenomena. And then, but you don't hold on to it, right? You don't let it get like, you don't let it be sticky, right? That's
Yeah.
that's the whole Jesus thing, right? Like in the world but not of the world. It's like
Yes,
that,
exactly.
it's that stickiness. Like that's, I think people misunderstand like attachment, right? Attachment doesn't mean that like you can't enjoy things in life, like sort of relieve yourself of attachments. It doesn't mean like you
Absolutely.
can't go and enjoy things in your life, but attachments are like those sticky things, those things that like stick with us, like greed, right? Or like
exactly.
stuff like that. And
Something that like actually controls like your behavior into like warps it into some sort of like compulsion or like need.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's okay to go and like, I don't know. It's okay to have nice things. It's okay to have nice cars. It's okay to have a nice house, right? But
yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that.
Sure. But then the question is like, how attached are you to this thing? Or like, how much do you allow that thing to frame your idea of yourself? Right? Like, do your possessions own you? And I think that, to me, like when we have the conversation of like attachment, that's part of it. It's like when you start to put a big part of who you are, or define a big part of who you are by the things that you have, that to me feels like attachment. But if you have a Lamborghini and a hot tub and a mansion and all that, but you're okay with leaving it all behind, right? If you had
absolutely.
to, like that to me feels real close to like being where I would like to be. Because I like nice things. I like hot tubs, right? But if I don't have a hot tub, I'm okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And I think that's like the fast track to do it, actually, because it's like that kind of concept where, if you're whole with what you have, if you're, happy and you cultivate that sense of wholeness when you don't really have much of anything, then it's just that much easier to
really is,
obtain any of those things and experience them for what they are, just because it's not coming from a place of deficit.
Sure. I had a time in, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I spent a whole summer homeless, and I was living in a tent behind my ex's parents' house.
I think I heard you remember like a little clip of you saying a piece from that.
That was one of the best things to ever happen to me, because it taught me how little I need to be happy. Like if I'm warm, if I'm dry, and I have some oatmeal and a book, dude, I'm fucking good. Like,
dude, I'm the same way.
Yeah, and hell, even if I don't have the book, I can meditate, and that's cool too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so when that's your baseline, dude, everything else is just like, it's just additional. It's like, okay, yeah, it's cool to have a car, and like I have this house now, and that's cool. But I know that if it all went away and I went back to, it's a little bit different when you have people who depend on you. But if we're just talking about me, like if I've got a tent and it's not 38 degrees, and I've got a book, or
absolutely,
I'm good, man. All this other stuff is like, it's just extra credit.
Exactly.
So what are you doing as far as, have you still been doing art and stuff, or?
Hell yeah, dude.
Hell yeah.
That's kind of why this past year has just been like me getting my ducks in a row. So I'm stoked for this next year, because I've just been getting a flow, and just about to release a bunch of different shit. So I'm real stoked on it. So yeah.
So you told me about the So you told me about the books. What are you planning on releasing this next year?
What I would like to do, I was gonna continue basically my music, so to speak, but I was like, I felt weird because I feel like this is like a new part in my life, and I'm trying to become more transparent, I guess, and I feel like that's one of the main things that is lacking in the world, and in that kind of Gandhi-esque way, be the change you wish to see in the world, and when you change yourself, you change the world. I want to be more transparent, all the flaws, I want to look, ridiculous and fun or quirky, or, the whole spectrum of good and bad, just to inspire people to open up more. So I want to be more consistent with posting stuff, but having that be more transparent and consistent with my art too, whether I'm, creating motion graphics or just sketching something out, or whether I'm just recording a riff, like a rough one, or, whatever that may be, just that people are, you know, seeing
I
what I
love that.
do and who I am.
I love that focus on transparency, because I feel like, and you've seen this as much as I have, and especially among the heavier genres, this
Yeah.
obsession with seeming like you've got it all together and that everything's perfect all the time and that it
Oh,
always
yeah.
comes together perfectly, when it's like we all know the reality is like,
No, it's rough, man.
It's tough.
Very rarely. Like, it's like those moments that everyone see, it's like 5% of like of the whole picture. Most of it's, you know, just grinding away, trying to. That's another thing that's like a relief is, you know, as much as I love Maharaja, the last band I was in, I love those dudes so much. They were probably like the best and easiest, smoothest band that I've ever been in. But yeah, in general, like all the other projects I've had is really difficult. Like getting everyone on the same page, all the, you know, it's like having a relationship however many different ways there are people. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, man, it's like you think having a relationship is hard, you know, romantic relationship. Most people don't understand that aren't musicians or aren't in a band, that it's just like, yeah, try multiplying that however many
sure,
different
yeah,
ways.
multiply that times 4, yeah, 4 or 5, easy.
And then adding money in the whole thing, making it actually a business. It's like, oh my God, it's like how many different stressors there? How many different ways can you add stress?
Absolutely. And I find
Yeah.
like there are a few things that, like, there are a few superpowers that I find with the bands that I talk to who are like doing well. One is they are really good at having difficult conversations. And that's relationships too, right? Like you guys need to be willing to sit down and have like the tough conversation when
Communication is key.
Absolutely. And you have to have that free, like, and you also have to allow that space where people can feel like they can open up, right? Like you can tell people that, hey man, you can tell me whatever you want. But then when they tell you something, you know, when they say something that maybe you don't agree with, when you jump all over them, it's like, yeah, hey, but that's not exactly, you did the lip service of saying that, hey, tell me whatever, but your reaction made it so that I never want to talk to you ever again. And it's like, you have to be, that takes a lot of maturity on, you know, on your part. Like, I mean, we all have attachments to the things we make. And when somebody else like disagrees, and especially if we were like very, if we loved that thing we made and then somebody else is like, yeah, I don't really like that, it becomes an emotional situation really quick, right? And then,
absolutely.
And then if you don't have the framework of like a healthy relationship, it then boils down to, or it degrades down to like petty insults and that kind of stuff.
That's rough.
And it's just, I mean, romantic relationships are the same way, right? Like if you don't have a framework for how to deal with like difficult problems or disagreements, like it's just fucking chaos. That's one thing they teach in therapy, which is like, okay, when you guys are getting into an argument, here's a framework you can use to sort of walk through that process. Like you say how you feel uninterrupted. The other person says that they heard you. They then say how they feel. You say that you heard, that you heard them, and then it's like, in the beginning, I've even joked with bands about this. In the beginning, it feels forced. It feels stupid. But the more you sort of go through that process, the more you sort of like, you will then naturally do it. Where I will give you the time to speak, and I will not interrupt you, and then I will maybe repeat back to you like what I heard you say, and then you tell me whether or not you feel like that's what you said. Because sometimes you say something and I hear it a different way. That happens with me and my wife all the time. I say something, she hears it a totally different way than I meant it, and then we begin arguing about that. And it's like, that's not even part of the, wasn't even the main problem. Exactly. So it's like having that framework of like being able to give each other the space to speak and be heard, and trying to be as rational and unemotional about those things as you can. Man, you're right though. It's like, it's complicated because there's such an emotional attachment to, especially art. It's such a personal thing that it can definitely be a lot to navigate. I think that's why the bands that I see that tend to do really well tend to have one person who is driving the creative aspect pretty heavily. Like they'll have a primary songwriter, and then everybody else is pretty much like, okay, like that's like 90% of the way there. I think
Yeah.
For that obviously doesn't work for everybody, but I can totally see from like a tactical perspective why that does work, because it's not like it's constantly up for a vote, or it's not like so democratic that it gets sort of like in a quagmire where everybody's like, there's all this debating. It's like sort of like it's like the United States versus China. It's like China is they're able to be way more tactical because it's nothing's up for debate. It's like, this is the way it is. They're like, okay, our entire city now has electric cars. You try to do that in the US, it's like you have to like create all these incentives, and it takes a lot longer. And we can debate about which system we prefer, but when it comes to like tactical effectiveness, like the leaps and bounds that China has made over the last 30 years compared to like the US, there's no comparison. China's, 30 years ago was a really shitty place to live. Now, a lot of it's pretty goddamn nice.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
So like that, it's like the trying to remain, trying to stay tactical. And I guess if you're going to have like a democratic approach to your art, the tactical aspect of that is having a framework for having difficult conversations and moving through them.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean by that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I asked if you knew what I meant by that.
Oh, absolutely, man. Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
No,
but
that's okay. Sure.
I know exactly what you mean there.
So, all right, so you're doing the music thing. Are you writing new music? Or are you releasing older stuff? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up, because it's a combination both. And in the light of transparency, I thought it would be kind of interesting for, like, it's crazy because a lot of people don't. I'm blessed to look as young as I do, because a lot of people, it like blows their mind now anymore, where they're like, "Wait, you're how old?" And like, I'm 32, and I don't really put it like, stock in age. It's just a number to me, but. It is interesting from that standpoint of being a musician, how it's interesting how, as a musician, that's something that's kind of an underlying thing that it's like if you wanted to be a serious musician when you were younger, we always felt like there was this unspoken like cap, like if like you were past your prime, like if you didn't fucking make it anywhere in your 20s, like just kill yourself.
Right.
It's like you can't do,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's been the like I've been talking recently about the traditional band model and how it annoys me, how exclusionary it is.
Oh,
because it's like
insane.
It's stupid. It's like, okay, so you have to make it by the time you're 25 or you're fucked. Like that's a stupid model. Like and it's like, and then it's like, if you make progress at any other aspect of your life, you're basically fucked, because it's like if you go to college and you rack up some student debt, it's like, well, okay, good luck paying off those student loans. If you get a decent job offer, well, you can't take that because you have to like maintain that your shitty fucking tour schedule that nobody even comes out to.
Yeah.
And then if you get married or have a kid, dude, you're fucked. Like you can't. Yeah. It's hard to fulfill the financial obligation to those people when you're devoting all of your time to this thing that has very little cash flow incoming. And it's like what I've been sort of. It feels like I'm chipping away at this, like a bigger idea. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, where it's like you're like,
oh, absolutely,
chipping it off in pieces, and you're like, there's something bigger here, but I'm just not like fully getting it yet. And it's like this. I'm obsessed with this idea of creating a framework for like people to be able to leverage technology to like have their music be like a serious side hustle. Where like you could where you could like have your main job, have your 9 to 5 where you're working 50 hours a week, but you're using technology to sort of supplement the hours that you can't spend on it because you're at your 9 to 5. Honestly though, like there's only so much work you can do on a band in a given week, right? Like if you work 40 hours a week and sleep 8 hours a day, like that still leaves you 72 hours. Why do you need more time than that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, dude, you're not, the problem usually is like just poor time management. Like they spend a bunch of time fucking around playing video games or like,
Yeah, it's like, and I feel like a lot of that comes down to also the concept of like fear of transparency and being real, because a lot of it is just like, if you're documenting, then that's it. Like, a lot of people feel like, oh, well, it's just too stupid, or people won't want it. No, that's bullshit.
True.
That's just an excuse so that you don't have to be transparent.
Dude, that's that ego thing kicking in, isn't it? It's like where they don't want to put out something that isn't like super compelling or isn't like super like high production value, and it's like that's just ego, man. And the thing that I say is like, you know, they say they don't want to put out anything that's shitty, and I'm like, shitty is relative. Like there's all kinds of like studio videos and shit that I used to watch that are terrible production quality, but I still love them because it's like, what I loved in those videos was the authenticity and the transparency and being taken along for the ride.
Oh, dude, and that's exactly what I'm being so inspired by now, is going back to like the stuff that I was inspired by when I was a kid, and like a lot of that was just like the black and death metal in the early 90s, when it's like everything was still fucking analog, and like you had to nail that shit, so it was imperfect, and I miss that. I miss the feelings. There's this like raw emotion with it that you miss out on when everything is like processed to death.
Definitely.
You know?
Well, I think that's something too. Like it's important to, I think, to consider that perfection often comes off as like being inaccessible, right? Because it's
exactly.
Like it doesn't feel human because it's basically not, right? And that can manifest itself in different ways, right? Like there are some bands that maybe that sort of mechanical sort of aesthetic works well, right? Like Necrophagist, right? Like do I necessarily want Necrophagist to be all loosey-goosey organic? Probably not, but it doesn't mean that couldn't manifest itself in other ways, like for example in like the content you're putting out. Right? Like,
yes,
it's okay
exactly.
Because there's so many bands that I talk to who are like doing this modern thing, and they love that like modern aesthetic, and I'm like, that's great, that's cool, do that. But when it comes to your daily content, it's okay to just like pick up your cell phone and be like selfie mode and just like talk. Like it's okay to just be you. You don't need like 3-point lighting and a fucking red camera and a whole production team. Yeah. It's like just be a fucking person, and you know, like just be you and show up over and over and over, and eventually you're going to build up an audience of people who just like you, who like, they love what you do, they like you as a person, and that's the audience you want. It's not that you don't want to, I mean, this is just my opinion, I don't think you want to build up an audience of people who are only there, like who only show up when you put $10,000 down on a music video. Like you want those people who show up for your fucking selfie mode shitty, you know, Instagram video, because like those are the people who, I don't know, I think they have a higher probability of just being into you and being into like you as a person, you know?
The people that really just enjoy you being you.
Sure. Well, like think about it like a relationship. I suppose it's a little bit easier from like a female perspective. Like, but do you only, you know, would you only, if you were, let's say you were a girl, would you only want a guy who loved you when you put all of your fucking makeup on and you wore like your best clothes? Or do you want the guy who loves you no matter what? Like, yeah, okay, it's great if you can, you know, dress up and wear makeup. That's great. But also when you're in your fucking PJs and you're not wearing makeup, like they love that too. So I think that, I mean, just treating it like relationships, like that's all it is. It's like, it's just relationships at scale, and you try to come up with systems to allow it to scale. Right? That's what like social media is really good for. That's what like paid ads are good for. It's like trying to create authentic relationships at scale. That's a lot of the work when you're trying to do this as like a serious like career pursuit.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's wild. But it's like that's what it's about, man. It's about creating experiences for people at scale. Yeah,
absolutely. And like little bite-sized forms. Like that's the other thing too, is I feel like people, and I wrestled with this too when I first started getting out there and putting stuff out there, making videos.
I love your videos, by the way. They're always so
thank you so much,
awesome.
Man. So I try to make them more bite-sized, because it's like the human attention span's only like, if you don't get somebody's attention in like 7 seconds, it's like done. So
and you have microseconds when they're going through their feed. You literally have like less than a second. So it's like that first 3 seconds
Yes.
is crucial. That's why like I always try to, with my written stuff, I try to do something that's maybe a little bit too much. That first sentence is always just a little bit overstating my point. And then either I'll clarify in the next few sentences, or I will clarify in the comments when people get fucking pissed off at me. But it's like it's like you have to get that like that thing that interrupts their like scrolling of the feed. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, go on. So like, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like the bite-sized pieces, man. A huge part of that too, I feel like, is and you already do this, and it's amazing. But like, yeah, the bite-sized piece aspect, because then it's like we also kind of like look at, in addition to the intro, it's kind of like, well, how long is this video? Am I really going to come back to it if it's like good, you know?
Right.
And it's like if it's more than like 5 minutes, depending on the platform, obviously, like way smaller if it's like Instagram or something. But yeah, it's just like making those like bite-sized bulleted points so that people can feel, you know, inspired and or fulfilled in just like a short amount of time.
I agree. And then for me, it's also been about, you have those little bite-sized bits, but then you also have the long form content for the people who are into that, right? So like, you know, like you'll see I have this little like audio experience thing that I do, which actually I'm recording our conversation now. I hope that's okay. Cause I think like,
oh no, I anticipated it.
Cool. Yeah. I do that. I record like everything. Cause usually like the people that I talk to, some good shit comes up, but so I have this like audio experience thing I do. And you know, we've already been talking for like about 40 minutes or so. Like that's 40 minutes of like super awesome content that,
oh yeah, dude,
that really, audio lends itself well to that, because I have a group of people, it's probably about like 25 people who have told me that they listen to my stuff when they're at work or when they're driving. And they're not going to watch my videos while they're at work. Like if, you know, cause some of my talks, they'll be like 2 hours long. They're not going to watch a 2 hour long video, but they might listen to a 2 hour long audio thing while they're doing other stuff, while they're driving, while they're working, while they're like, you know, farting around the house. So it's like,
yeah.
I think it's a combination where for me, videos between like 30 seconds to 3 minutes seem to work really well. And then I will also then try to point to longer form content. Because usually what happens is like I've got these like 3 hour, you know, 2 hour long conversations. And then those little videos I make are just little clips from that.
Absolutely.
And then I'll try to direct them to that 2 hour long conversation for the people who are really like into it. So it's
that's the way to do it.
It's like macro content.
All of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You do macro, and then you slice that up into micro, and then you try to do that in a way that honors whichever platform you're on, right? Like Instagram, I could do a 3 minute long video on Facebook, no problem. Instagram, though, is only 1 minute. So then it's like, I got to repackage that for Instagram, and then you've got IGTV. So then I have to do it, you know, in the like a vertical aspect ratio. So then I repurpose it to that, and I'm like, you know, sometimes it feels like a lot. Sometimes I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I need like an assistant or something to handle this shit for me.
Yep.
And I have what I need to do is I have an intern who helps me out with stuff sometimes that I sort of commandeer, and I need to put him to work on that. Like,
absolutely.
Because right now, honestly, what I would love to do is like, I believe that if you do something over and over, it makes sense to automate it, right?
Yeah.
Like if, you know, like for example, that like what I should do is tell the intern, like, I'm going to make these long form videos, and then I want you to do X, Y, and Z with every single one of them, right? So if it's a 2 hour long conversation, I want you to make an audio version of it. I want you to go through and slice out as many, like whatever you think of is the best, you know, like 1 to 3 minutes, slice those up into little micro videos, and then make those appropriate for these platforms. It's a lot. I mean, it feels like a lot for one person to be doing, especially because I have like, you know, I've got this shit that I'm doing, but I also have 2 other businesses that I have to work on too. So it's like, That's why I'm so jealous of bands, like full-on bands, because they've got like 5 fucking people. Like,
I know, right?
5 people. Like, just delegate your tasks. Like, delegate the tasks. Hold your people accountable, and you can get so much shit done, man. Like,
oh yeah, you really can if everyone's all on board.
Exactly.
Which rarely happens.
Well, that's the hard part, right? You it's like it's your team, and it's like you're doing all your stuff you're doing now. You're doing it solo now, right? Like you're not doing like the full band thing right this second.
No, and I'm actually pretty stoked on it. As much as there is like a magic with working, with consistent people, like I miss Maharaja a lot, and always will. And I don't. It's kind of weird how they I don't know how things happen because of life, I guess. But it actually feels a lot better, way better actually in some respects, to just not have to really answer to anybody or run stuff by anybody. It's just me being me and transparent, and there's it's so crazy. Like I can get so much more stuff done because I don't have to run stuff by every single person. And it's not like, when you're in a band setting, it's like oftentimes it'll get shot down. Anybody's idea will get shot down by at least like one person, so it can be like really difficult trying to come up with like a a flow that everybody's in on and all on board.
Dude, bands can't even decide like where they want to eat. Like I've been
exactly, yes.
It's like we'll be doing when I was recording, right? Like, dude, they would spend 30 minutes trying to decide like where everybody wants to eat, and I'm like, there are 1,000 like more decisions that are way more important than that to be made like over the course of a month or 2 months. And like if each of those hopefully it takes longer than 30 minutes. If you took 30 minutes to decide that you guys want to go to KFC, like hopefully you give more thought into some other more important aspect of your project. But then it starts to be such a fucking time hog just to get any simple task done. And it's like, that's why I believe in something that I've heard called decentralized command, where it's like, basically maybe you'll have one person who's acting as like the, I guess in a military aspect, it's like the commander, but you think of like a CEO, where it's like somebody who's responsible for making sure that everything is kind of heading in the right direction. But then you give individual members autonomy over some aspect of the band. So for example, you'd give one guy, his thing is booking. So he decides where you guys play shows, and it's not up for debate. He decides where you go, right? And then when it comes to like content creation and distribution, you have one person, that's what they do. Now maybe at a maybe quarterly or monthly, you guys sit down and you look at, okay, well, what have we done this month? Is there anything that we want to modify? That's the time where you have the discussion. But when you're when you're constantly reevaluating people's decisions day after day after day after day, it ends up just taking too much goddamn time. It's like, let them go out there and fuck it up for a month. Then then when you guys have your meeting in a month, you can be like, hey, wow, a lot of this shit didn't work, but maybe there were 1 or 2 things in there that did really well. Let's do more.
And that's pure gold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you find those like pieces, it's all worth it.
Absolutely. You start to triangulate. That's like, in a way, I'm almost like quantity over quality, because it's like when you have no data, that's all you got is quantity. Just put it out. Like, try to like use your intuition to guide you in the right direction, and then you'll see a couple things that work. That informs your intuition a little bit more, and you start to be able to figure out like, okay, what seems to work for us. Like, that's why I get so big on like bands I do these like consultations with. They'll ask me like, well, what can I do? And I'm like, start putting out content every single day, 2 to 7 pieces of content. They're like, well, I don't know like that I have that many things. I'm like, I don't care. Just show up over and over and over and over. Because then what you're going to do is you're going to see like which pieces of content seem to work better. I have a buddy that I talked to the other day. He's a phenomenal guitar player, phenomenal piano player, terrible singer. But he kept posting videos of him singing, and he's like, they're not really getting any interaction. And I'm like, yeah, but look at this. Look at these piano videos you put out. He did one where he dressed up like a Halo character. and played like the Halo 1 theme song on piano. And that did like 10 times better than anything he had ever put out. So I'm like,
that's awesome.
That's valuable data. It's like, okay,
yeah.
The audience that you've built so far, they like you playing an instrument. They certainly like you playing piano. And they also like you infusing a little bit of humor. So that's useful information. Now, if you want to go down that route or not, that's up to you. But at least you sort of have something to go off of. You know, you have like some data to be able to inform your decision. But if he only showed up, you know, once a month, or if he only put out that Halo video, there would be nothing to contrast that against to be able to be like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like there just wouldn't be enough information to be able to make a decision.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's like, it's stuff like that. Like I love those. I love those videos you put out. Like they're so like, specifically the ones where you're talking about, I mean, they feel very like life coachy, where it's, you know what I mean? Where it's, well, and I would love to see like a project that goes beyond just like being music, but then also incorporates just that aspect of you, right? Like that sort of comes down to transparency, like that type of stuff, like the conversation we're having now, that's a big part of who you are, you know? So like,
thank you. And that's actually what I'm trying to do with the music and integrating all of that, the writings, the videos, the life coaching stuff, but also like my death metal. It's like incorporating, I feel like I've lived a very compartmentalized life for a long time. I like built, you know, this community of like light and healing through like yoga and medical massage therapy and all this other stuff. But at the same time, all throughout that time, I had been processing my shadow side, you know, through black and death metal and just being gnarly as fuck. And it's like, I want to be real. I don't want to feel like those should be like mutually exclusive.
I don't think it is, because like you have other guys who are doing stuff like that, right? You look at like what you're doing reminds me sort of what Nurgle has been doing over the last like 5 or so years.
Yeah, he's been a source of great inspiration in regards to that, because I feel like he has especially bridged that gap, which is amazing, and people have taken to it so well.
I agree. And what I love about it is like, okay, so I've been doing like this podcast with the YouTube channel Beheading the Traitor, right? And one thing that when we sat down to talk, I was like, I don't want this to be like a dumb metal podcast, because that's what tends to happen when people think metal and when people create content for metal. It's always like, it's so lowbrow, it's stupid, but like, that's not me. And I love metal, and I know all kinds of smart people who also like fucking heavy, dark music, but they're not dumb, stupid people. They're very smart, they're intelligent, they have deep thoughts and emotions, and they're multifaceted. So one thing that I want to do with that podcast was be like, I want to have smart conversations with people who also like heavy music. And I think like what you're hitting on is really cool too, because it's like, just because people like heavy music doesn't also mean like that they're not interested in exploring like deeper aspects of themselves and exploring, of course, their light, their dark as well as their light, and being conscious about that type of thing. I like that commingling of things that seem like total opposites at first, right? That because again, any like average person is going to be like, they think death metal, they think like dumb fucking I don't know, like sort of a brute of a man, but you being like, no, that doesn't seem to be true. Like a lot of the people who like that music are actually just fucking nerds, and a lot of them get into like nerdy shit. I mean, I would say like if you're getting into like Stoic philosophy, or you're getting into like reading holy scriptures from several different religions and finding ways that those things correlate, or at least trying to pull out aspects of that feel that resonate with you. That's some really nerdy shit. Like the average person isn't doing that. And I know for a fact, like what you're doing isn't, it's not limited to just you. Like you're interested in this. Obviously I'm interested in it. And I've talked to a lot of other people that are like on this trip too, of like, maybe they were attracted to dark music initially because they had some shit that they were working through, perhaps, or they had for whatever reason they were attracted to it. But eventually they're like, okay, but I don't want to live in that, right? I don't want
Exactly.
to just be in my darkness. I also want to explore. I want to go beyond that. I want to go also be happy, but then also honor both sides, right? Like my dark and my light. And I don't know. I just think that like the way you're doing it is really interesting to me for several.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, what I really, really love about it, I love it when people are doing things that, at least to me, like it makes sense. Like the shit that you're putting out is you, right? It doesn't feel like you're putting on a mask or like you're trying to like, you're not trying, it doesn't feel like you're trying to cater to a demographic. It's just like, hey, I'm going to be me and I'm going to attract an audience of people who like that. You know, and
Exactly.
That to me is really nice. It's refreshing to see because I know that like when you do your videos, I'm like, yeah, that's basically what he sounds like. That's basically how he is. So it's like, I don't know. It's cool and refreshing.
Thanks. Thank you so much, man.
Sure, man. So
Yeah.
So what is your what's your timeline? Do you have a timeline on some of this stuff? I know it's like you said, you kind of play it by ear, but do you have like a framework for like when you're trying to release stuff or what that looks like?
Yeah, so I'm looking for like early 2019, so hopefully within like January, February. What I'm actually going to do is round up, and I'm doing this with my significant other, Rebecca Rott, who used to play bass for Hell Scorched Earth. I don't know if you...
I know of them.
No, yeah. And so it's weird. We've... God, like, she's my absolute best friend in the whole wide world. So we've been through some fucking crazy shit, hell and back, lost both our bands, and so you know we follow your stuff like religiously just because it's so cathartic to to see what you're doing and to you know it's like balm on the soul for you know artists that have put everything into it and seemingly lost all of it, you know.
Right.
And so without going further down that road. We are, you know, coming together, mixing what stuff that we have had. 'Cause she's an amazing artist, so we're using kind of that imagery and putting it into the riffs and all of that stuff. So it's just like it's a culmination of both of our things. And so I went, for the sake of transparency, I'm kind of going back through my catalog of stuff that I've recorded and re-releasing that stuff to kind of coincide with my videos, my writings, and everything like that. So actually, what I'm beginning with, I'm going to re-release the Fall of Babylon tracks.
No shit, really?
Yes, I'm going to re-release them, and I'm going to do it under our project name, Mauled by Wolves.
Cool.
Which is kind of like a several different plays, I guess, on the concept of like the native parable of the two wolves fighting, and every man, the one that wins is the one that you feed.
Yep.
So like the wolf of light and the wolf of dark. But since it's basically like a two-person project, and then concepts of like, you know, overcoming your shadow side or integrating it or transcending. So yeah, we're just kind of like doing this, like, you know, taking like a lot of her old art that had been thrown out or not used or anything like that, combining it with like some of the music that I had recorded, and then slowly integrating into, you know, our tracks that we've written together. So it's really interesting and cool, and it's just going to encompass like the transparency of the shit that we've been through, sacrifices that we made, things that never went anywhere. But yeah, like it's I'm going to start off with that one. I'm renaming the album Sackcloth and Ashes.
Cool.
And yeah, so from there on, hopefully within the like around January, February.
I love the idea of it.
Be...
I love the idea of it being like this, like it's a little out there, right? Like it's, and I love that. I love that it's definitely multimedia, of course, but it's also like it's doing something that most people don't do, which is revisit material from past projects and really honoring your, I guess, your lives together and sort of the journey that both of you guys have taken. That to me starts to do something that I love, which is make it it's bigger than a band. It's like really, I don't know, highlighting your guys' journey as people. And like that to me that's way more compelling than just 8 songs on a CD or 8 songs in a, some streaming platform. You know what I mean? Like it makes it into something that is, I guess the best way I could say it, like bigger than being in a band. It feels like a comprehensive like piece of art that feels like a genuine part of you. And by doing it the way that you're doing it, it's not up for debate. Like it's deliberate. Yeah. It's not just like, because I think that's where a lot of bands mess up, is even if they're doing things deliberately, and this especially happens with lyrics, where a lyricist will put in so much time and effort into crafting this like perfect piece of written work, and then it gets hidden behind a wall of electric guitars, which is fine, but it's like, yeah, I think that a lot of the time we miss major aspects of the project just because there is the barrier of, there's the only way they're displaying that them being deliberate is just through the music. And it's like sometimes you have to just articulate it plainly, like not up for debate. Here's what this is, here's the context, here's like here's who we are, why we do what we do, like that.
Absolutely.
Because I think sometimes like the artistry can obfuscate some of the more finer details of what it is you're doing. And sometimes it's just really nice to hear an artist say, here's what I was thinking of when I made this. And you're like, oh.
Exactly. Yeah. I know a lot of artists like want, it to be ambiguous and be like, oh, you can formulate your own stuff. But I think there's also something equally powerful to be like, hey, this is what was going on at this point in time. This is what I was thinking. This is what I was feeling. These were this was the human agenda that I had, which, this was the outcome from the actions that I took. Like, just being transparent and real and telling that story of like, life's rocky. You don't know exactly what's around the bend, and to impart that on every level, whether it's like, written or it's a video or it's your album or it's the artwork, it's like, to incorporate all of that and have it coincide because it's just real, it's life, it's you. So that's what we're trying to convey.
I love it. And what I love is like, it's out there, right?
Thank you.
Like it's out there in the best way. It's not safe, right? You're putting out there, you're putting it out there. You're willing to be vulnerable. You're opening yourself up for people to be, to hurt you, right? I mean, that's what vulnerability is, right? But it's like,
absolutely.
But by willing to do that, you also create the opportunity for deep, meaningful relationships, right? Like with
exactly
with Rebecca, right? Like, how deep would your guys' relationship be if you were just constantly guarded? It wouldn't be very deep, right? It wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, and then by opening up and being vulnerable, of course, you opened yourself up to being hurt, but seemingly she didn't hurt you so bad that you were done with the relationship. You guys have been together for a while now, right? It's been
we have. Yeah, like almost 4 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. But it never would have happened if you just kept your guard up, right? And you never opened yourself up to being hurt, right?
And that's what's cool about her. I mean, like, and then that's why we're besties, It's like, there's something to be said about seeing each other at your absolute worst and just being raw and real and, still like absolutely, loving the person even more actually because of the whole entire thing. Because so many people are just, they have the codependent concept of like, you need to be, this unspoken, you need to be like how I need you to be and vice versa. This is our agreement. This falsehood of like, you need to be absolutely perfect and fill A, B, C, and D.
Sure.
And I need to be this for you.
Ooh, and here's one that's even more complicated, right? It's easy to say you need to be perfect for me. What gets even weirder is when you don't make them suffer in the way they need to suffer. Right, because then that gets really weird because everybody has these like built-in things, right? Like, for example, if a girl had a father who was emotionally distant, a lot of the time she'll she'll take that need to feel emotionally distant to her romantic relationships, even though it doesn't make any sense. It's like the human mind craves consistency above all else. So it's like, what I find and what I've seen a lot is that people will, of course, gravitate towards people who make them feel good in the way they need to feel good, but then also find people who how do I say it, make them hurt in the way that they need to hurt. And then the question is like, okay, well, the fuck do you do with that, right? Like, are you, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, do you? It's almost, you know, because we really can't help who we're attracted to, right? And some of that stuff just runs so deep. You know, if you're mirroring, like, I joke with my wife. My mom, when I was younger, was pretty emotionally unstable. It was a pretty crazy childhood, right? And I joke with my wife, who's extremely emotional, and she, like, you know, she'll go off about things that I don't really think make sense. But I joke with her, I'm like, but that's what I need. I need her to go off and be crazy every once in a while, because that's just sometimes how I need to suffer. And then it's weird. I mean, it gets real fucking strange. But like, when you look out into the landscape of people, you see people, of course, getting together with people who remind them of their parents, and that goes all the way through from the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, you know, that's just,
absolutely.
You know, people routinely go from abusive parents to abusive relationship, and it's because they know how to navigate that. Right? If you come from an abusive household and then you land in a healthy one, that feels really foreign, and it can feel uncomfortable because your brain is like, we don't know how to navigate.
It can scare the shit out of you.
Sure. And it's like I think people don't understand that their brain isn't designed to keep them happy. It's designed to keep them safe. And sometimes those things are very different.
Yep, absolutely.
That's wild. That's fun. That's fun shit to think about. It starts kind of like how we were talking about in the very beginning. Like, when you start diving into this stuff, it gets very fucking complicated. And it's like, sometimes you have to be like, do I even want to do this? Is this the work that I want to do? Or do I just want to stay surface level and have my little job and have my little family? Or do I want to get into, like, you know, psychosexual stages of development, get all you know, and get all fucking weird about it? And
I think it's good in spurts, man. It's like, you know, it's always good to, like, strive for it and push your boundaries, get out of your comfort zone, but always understand that, like, you know, you can retreat when you need to. It's not about, like, you know, absolutely shattering them to the point where you're, like, traumatized. But
you hop in, you read that paragraph, and you take a couple days to think about it.
Exactly.
Like, man, what the fuck does that? Okay, all right. It's like I sort of like, I think maybe you said earlier, like, bite-sized. Like, just
bite-sized.
Take as much as you can chew. And try to avoid letting it, like, shatter your entire existence.
Absolutely.
All right, man, I got to get off here.
Yeah, no worries, man. Oh, dude, it was so good talking to you.
Likewise, man. This is really fun.
Oh, same here,
dude,
man.
Let's try to circle back and chat again. I know we had when you were still up here, we kept saying that we were going to talk more frequently, like we were going to go to Panera again and chat.